All right, welcome back. So we're going to start in on muscle metabolism. We're only going to talk at the very superficial level of how ATP is actually produced in muscle fibers. I'm sure you've gone through ATP production, the Krebs cycle, and glycolysis, and all of those different cellular respirations, either the anaerobic, aerobic, in either Intro to Bio or Bio 181. So I won't rehash that. I'm just going to cover it very superficially here. Okay, and the level at which I cover it is what I will ask you and I will expect you to know for the lecture exam. Okay, so yay! All right, let me hide me here so you get a better view of these slides. I think this is pretty obvious. Bone muscles are contracting. They're using up a lot of ATP. Okay, and ATP that's sort of freely floating around in the cytoplasm of muscle cells, in the sarcoplasm, will only last for a few seconds of action. So your muscles are constantly making more ATP. So basically you have three different sources. Sort of going from the shortest source and small sprint-like actions to sort of the longest. Creatine phosphate can power maximal, and we're talking maximal, muscle contraction for about 15 seconds. So really this is used for short burst kinds of energy. Okay, so really like, you can see your 100-meter dash, quick power lift, something like that. And creatine phosphate is also unique to muscle fibers. So how does it actually work? Basically, so your muscles will have creatine, right? And as I mentioned, you do have sarcoplasmic levels of ATP. So when your muscle is at rest, what happens is that creatine will take one of those phosphates off the ATP, right? And basically it'll store it as creatine phosphate. And then this ADP can undergo one of the other respirations and replenish itself, become ATP again. And then another creatine molecule will come around and take the phosphate. And this will keep happening as long as your muscles are relaxed and as long as you have creatine available, right? If all your creatine is full, this kind of stops and you simply have ATP floating around. Okay. Now let's say we are all of a sudden contracting our muscle now. So I'm lifting something really heavy real fast. Well, I'm using up ATP very quickly because my muscles are contracting. We talked about that in the previous two lectures, videos. And now I'm left with ADP. Now if I want to quickly replenish that ADP, what it's going to do is it's going to go back to that creatine phosphate and go, give me that phosphate I lent you. I need it now. And it does. It instead of having to go through one of those respirations, either anaerobic or aerobic, it can quickly get that phosphate and turn back into ATP and then give that phosphate to the muscle and undergo, muscle contraction, right? And this will keep working as long as you have creatine phosphate. Okay? And that's the entire idea behind creatine supplements. So athletes will take creatine supplements so that they can increase their muscle stores of creatine. So the more creatine you have, the more creatine phosphate you can make, which means that you can have more high-level energy or more high-level muscle contractions for a longer period of time. Okay, but and so this will also help you build muscles. But I mean, your muscles make their own creatine. And your body, and we'll talk more about this when we get to the brain too. Your body is very good at not making extra stuff if it doesn't have to. Okay? Obviously, things can go wrong, but so if your body knows, if you're taking creatine supplements, your muscles are going, wait, whoa, why am I making some? We got plenty, right? So basically your body will shut down the synthesis. It's like, I don't need to make it, I've got plenty. So if all of a sudden you stop taking creatine, your body sometimes goes, look, I closed down that creatine factory a while ago. I'm not opening that back up. So in some people, not everyone, some people, if they take particularly high levels for particularly chronic periods of time or just simply sensitive to it, sometimes their bodies, after they've taken supplements, their bodies will not produce it on their own. So then they're stuck taking supplements for the rest of their lives. Also, the part of your body that kind of filters excess creatine from your system is your kidneys. Okay? And sometimes if people's kidneys are damaged, that extra bit of creatine that it has to filter can damage the kidneys even further. So there are some questions about how safe is it to take these creatine supplements chronically and at high levels. But basically, all I want you to know about anaerobic cellular respiration is that it will provide you ATP for activities that lasts anywhere from 30 to 40 seconds. Again, we're talking maximal activity. So, 200-meter race. So a little bit longer than that creatine. After you've basically depleted that, anaerobic cellular respiration is trying to give you some ATP. And then if you have any kind of activity that's going on for long periods of time, so you can see here the production of ATP using aerobic cellular respiration starts after 30 seconds. So it starts in there fairly quick. And this is not to say that all the other ones aren't going on in the background at the same time. But basically your body will shift to predominantly aerobic cellular respiration if that activity lasts for more than 10 minutes. So if you're kind of jogging along for over 10 minutes, pretty much all of your ATP that you're making is you're getting it from this aerobic cellular respiration. And I think we know that. And you can basically make ATP in aerobic cellular respiration from all sorts of different molecules, precursor molecules. All right. So what causes your muscles to get tired, right? Well, and we know, and when we talk about muscle fatigue, what we're talking about is the inability to contract after prolonged activity. So you want to lift that weight and your muscle's like, no, not gonna happen. You've been lifting, I don't know, let's say you're doing bicep curls, right? And let's choose like an easy weight. Like, let's say you're using 20-pound weight and you've done all the biceps curls, you count the 20-pound weight. Then you pick up a 15-pound weight, you do them. And after a while, you can't do any more of those at that weight. You drop down to 10 pounds, and then you can't do it after a while. 5. You can even get down to like 3-pound weights that normally are like, tossing a pebble. They're so super light. However, after prolonged activity, I mean, even those will become hard. At some point, your biceps are like, no, and you won't even be able to lift that. So what happens? What's causing this fatigue? Okay. Part of it is what's known as central fatigue. What it is, it's basically your brain saying that you're tired. Like, so if we stuck electrodes and like different types of monitoring devices into your muscles, you still have plenty of oxygen, you have plenty of ATP, you have plenty of everything. There's not a huge build of lactic acid. Temperature's fine. But if you ask the individual, they'd say like, yeah, I'm tired and I don't want, I can't do it. I can't lift it. It's basically it's kind of in your head. It's that idea that your brain is trying to protect you from overdoing it and potentially damaging your muscle and tearing it. So you do not get this computer-like head-up display saying, "Warning, muscle integrity compromised. Muscle integrity compromised in 10 seconds." You don't get anything like that. What you get is, man, I feel tired, right? So anyway, so the brain is the first thing that starts telling you that you're tired. That's how you feel. After that, if you kind of keep pushing through, at some point, your neurons simply do not have any more acetylcholine. You have released it all. Okay? You do not have any more creatine phosphate. You've used it all up. There is no more calcium in that sarcoplasmic reticulum. You have used all that up, or it's all bound up. You can't get any more oxygen into your lungs. There is no more glycogen. And then, remember, kind of like some of the waste products are lactic acid and ADP. You simply do not have enough ATP to help your muscles contract. Then finally, heat. Remember, muscles produce heat. And proteins, once you get to a certain temperature, they don't work as well as they should, I guess I should say. So heat alone will simply cause the actin and the myosin not to work at their optimum levels. And so you start feeling tired. So all of these things will contribute to muscle fatigue. So let's kind of talk about how muscles work together and the types of contractions. Because really, it's pretty astounding the things that we can do, right? Okay. So we mentioned to you before, you saw this image before, where we had this motor neuron. So we had the purple one, and went to these 2 different muscle cells, and this green one went to these green muscle cells. So what those are motor units. Okay, so that's one motor neuron and all the skeletal muscle cells, or muscle fibers or myofibers, that it stimulates. So in this case, this green motor unit is this motor neuron and these 3 cells that it's innervating, or this purple one and the 2 cells that it is innervating. Now in your body, you can have very tiny motor units that has 1 neuron and 10 cells, or you can have a very large one motor neuron and 2,000 cells. Okay? As you can see kind of here, the muscle fibers that one of those neurons will innervate, it's scattered throughout the belly of the muscle, the meaty part of the muscle. So you can kind of see here, it's green one, and then green one over here. Okay? They tend not to just clump in one area. The total strength of contraction depends on how many motor units are activated and how large the motor units are. So again, if you have a motor unit of 10, it's a lot weaker than a motor unit of 2,000. Right? I mean, just think of like a tug of war. Right? If you have 10 people pulling and 2,000 people pulling, they're going to win. Right? Here's the thing. So the bigger the motor unit, the stronger a single motor unit is going to be. It's obvious. However, in different parts of our body, we're not so much concerned about powerful contractions as more precise ones. So the more tiny motor units we have, the more precise control we have over our movements. So in areas of our body like our fingers, right? So our fingers do very complicated tasks like writing, calligraphy, art, whatever, like playing the piano, playing guitar, whatever it is. We want to have lots of small motor units so we can have lots of very precise movements. Okay? Versus, say, something like our quadriceps, very large muscles, the movements don't have to be that elaborate. What we really care about is strong, powerful movements so we can run or kick. Okay, so not only so again, total strength is going to depend on how many motor units and how large they are. So you can even see here, if I only use 1 motor unit, it's not going to be as strong as if I used both motor units, right? It's just again just power in numbers. So motor units in a whole muscle will fire asynchronously. So basically what that means is that some of the fibers are active, others are relaxed. Okay, that basically allows, so as some are firing, then they'll relax. The other ones that were relaxed, they'll fire. That helps those that were firing first recuperate, right? So it delays muscle fatigue so the contraction can be sustained. It also helps produce smooth muscular contractions, right? So if I'm going to reach for my pen or my pencil on my desk, I do not need as powerful a movement as if I was, I don't know, trying to punch a zombie, right? I want a much stronger movement. Okay? And as I mentioned to you before, precise movements will require smaller contractions, so you're going to need those motor units in those areas that are particularly adapted for these tiny precise movements will be smaller. And then if I need large power movements, you see very large motor units. This idea of muscle tone, basically your muscles they are all somewhat contracted at any given point in time. Okay, so basically your muscles are firm even though they're relaxed. This is particularly obvious like in your face. Have you ever seen someone who has paralysis in their face, like especially Bell's palsy? So basically it's like paralysis of like half the individual's face, like from the nose laterally, right? The right side of the face or left side of the face. That side that's paralyzed is very droopy because, again, there's no muscle tone there. Right? So that's basically what that is. So it's also going to be important in maintaining your posture, so keeping your head upright. And also is important in maintaining blood pressure. And so your blood vessels have a particular tone that's going to maintain a level of blood pressure. There's a type of shock that causes all your blood vessels to dilate, so to expand. And by all the blood vessels inappropriately expanding all at the same time, it massively drops your blood pressure, and you faint, you pass out, and it can cause damage to different organs because they're not getting enough flow going to them. All right. So let's take a look at this graph. What we're talking about here is a contraction of all the fibers in a motor unit. Okay. So you can kind of see here, so on the y-axis we have the force of the contraction, so as we go up, the rate of the force. And then on the x-axis here we have time. So here's 0 time, and then, as we go. So what we call a muscle twitch, basically what you see here with the arrows, this is where the nerve has fired. Now there's a small little latent period. Can you see that in blue here, where there's really no change in the force. So the nerve signal has fired, but there's no change in force. Why do you think that is? Take a second. So what's going on here, right, is that you have the nerve fire. If you go back to that summary slide that we had last lecture, right, nerve fires, that acetylcholine actually has to get across that synaptic cleft. It has to bind to the receptors. Those receptors have to open. They have to allow sodium in. That signal has to go across that cell membrane, the sarcolemma. It has to go down the transverse tubules. It has to get to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The sarcoplasmic reticulum has to release the calcium. The calcium has to get to troponin. It changes its shape. It pulls on the tryptomyosin. And at that point, the myosin heads will attach. The ADP and P have to detach before we even get movement. We have to have all of that happen before we get any kind of force. Now, it doesn't take very long. I mean, if you look, it's maybe 5 milliseconds, 5,000ths of a second, okay? Less than the blink of an eye. However, there is some small delay from the time that you send the signal, hey, muscle contract, to the time that it actually starts to contract, okay? But once that signal goes, all the fibers in that motor unit will contract. And again, we're only sending one muscle signal, so then acetylcholine esterase breaks down the acetylcholine. Basically, there's no more nerve signal, there's no more signal to send calcium into the cell, so the sarcoplasmic reticulum actively pumps the calcium back into itself, and then basically muscle relaxes. Right? Depending on where you are, that twitch can last anywhere from 20 to 200 milliseconds. Not long, that's milliseconds, thousandths of a second. So let's take a look at this. So here are these different myograms. So we're looking at motor units, right? And mind you, this is somewhat artificial. What we're looking at here is what's going on, you know, with an electrode and stuff being hooked up into a machine. So where my cursor goes. So again, here on the y-axis we have the force of contraction. On the x-axis we have time. In blue, what you're seeing here, these are action potentials. So that's a nerve signal. Nerve signal, nerve signal. Okay. So just like we saw a second ago, I send a nerve signal, it takes a bit of time, I get muscle contraction and then relaxation. Okay. I send in a muscle signal, I get contraction, so I get some force. And now look, I'm going to send in another nerve signal before that muscle fully relaxes. So it contracts again. But lo and behold, that second contraction is a lot stronger than the first one. So let's do that again. Send in a nerve signal, muscle contracts, starting to relax. Send in a nerve signal, it contracts, starts to relax. Send in a nerve signal, it contracts. Send in a nerve signal, it contracts. And then no more nerve signals, it relaxes, goes back to normal. And then if I send in a lot of nerve signals, contract, 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 I never let it relax. You'll see it just goes up, 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 up. And then it finally plateaus. There is no more force. I haven't run out of room here. Muscle cannot contract any stronger than it already is contracting. No more nerve signals, it'll go back to relaxing. Okay? So let's think about this for a second. Just take a moment. What's going on right here? Why is the second contraction greater than that first one? What could possibly lead to this? Okay. Hopefully, as you're thinking about this, what you've come up with, so let's think again about all the events that are going on. Sent the electrical signal, I've released acetylcholine, I'm releasing calcium, right? Some of the myosin heads are attaching. Now, it's starting to relax, but now I've got another signal, more acetylcholine. So basically more acetylcholine, more calcium is being released, more myosin heads are going to attach. And that keeps happening. More acetylcholine, more calcium, more myosin heads attaching. The more heads that attach, the stronger the contraction. Now, you only have a limited amount of myosin heads. you only have a limited amount of actin, so you can only produce a certain amount of force. No matter how much you want to, you can't produce a force past everything being attached. Okay, so that's why you plateau. So this is known as an unfused tetanus. Okay, so the muscle is contracting this entire time. It's contracting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. However, it's what's called unfused because you get these little dips. Okay. However, if you don't give it that opportunity to rest, what you end up with this plateau is called an actual fused tetanus. Now, I don't know if you've ever had the joy of experiencing a totally fused tetanus like this. It is very, very painful. Okay, having all your muscles maximally clench up is very painful. You usually would not see this unless you have some sort of like black widow bite kind of thing. You get tetanus. You get tetanus shots, right, which causes all your muscles to maximally contract, or there's something else going on that's causing your muscles to spasm. It is, again, it's very painful. All right. So let's just talk about a couple different types of contractions. We have isotonic contractions. In this case, a load is being moved, and an isometric contractions, in which case there is no movement. You're simply, like in this case, you see this image here, you're simply holding the book out. So isometric means there's no movement. So it's the same meter, isometric. Isotonic basically means the same tone. All right. So you can either have what's known as a concentric contraction, so the muscle shortens, or you have an eccentric contraction, the muscle lengthens. Okay. So you know this, like if you were to, I don't know, pick up a weight, right? That's like, let's say a bicep curl. You're undergoing a concentric contraction, and if you slowly lower that weight, that's an eccentric contraction. If you were to hold that weight out straight out in front of you, like this individual is holding out the book, that's an isometric contraction. All right, so we're at the 20-minute mark. I will stop here. The next recording will pick up here. As always, questions, emails, in lab, feel free to ask. Okay, I will see you next time.